Today we're going to be working on lesson 2.7, which is chapter 2, section 7, on finding the percent of a number. You can follow along and write your notes on textbook page 148. So the first part says, find the percent of a number. You can use a fraction and decimals to find the percent of a number. To find the percent of a number, write the percent as a fraction with a denominator of 100, because remember, it's per 100. Then you'll multiply the fraction by the numerator. By the number. The first problem says, or the first example says, refer to the circle graph. Suppose there are 300 students, you want to underline 300 students, at York Middle School. Find the number of students that have cheese as a snack. So the first thing I wanted you to notice too is that I underlined number of students because oftentimes when students are doing percent of a number problem, when they finally come up with their final answer, they want to throw a percent sign on the end. You're no longer in percents. When you're finding the percent of a number, you're finding an actual number. So in this case, we're finding the actual number of students. We're no longer finding percentages. So I just wanted to make sure to point that out right away. So the first thing you do is look at the table, and you want to, or not the table, the circle graph, and you want to put a circle around cheese because that's 15%. The next thing that you're going to want to do is put 15 per 100 because 15% literally means 15 per 100. Then you're going to write 15 per 100, and you're going to multiply it by the 300 that are in the total school. So you have 300 total students. That number came up from the problem. And then you're going to cross simplify, as I've done here, by dividing out that 100. So you get 1 on the bottom and 3 on the top. And then you're finally left with 15 times 3, the numerator of 15 and the 3. And that gives you your answer of 45 students. If this were a test, you would want to make sure that you wrote 45 and then the word students, because you know with word problems I'm looking for the what the unit is so that I know that you know what you're doing. You don't need to erase that on your paper. I'm only erasing it so that I have some space with the graph still here. I'm showing you now the second method, and we're going to use percent to decimal left for method 2 to change this percent into a decimal. So off to the side, I've written percent to decimal left, or PDL. You need to do the same. So then we move the decimal 2 spaces to the left from the outside of the 5 to the inside of the 1. So that's 2 spaces left, and we get 0.15. Remember that 0 is not, that 0 is a leading 0, so it doesn't change the value, but it's a formatting 0. From there, we're going to multiply 300, which was the total number of students, times the 0.15, which we got as our percent that we changed to a decimal. You can see off to the side on the right that 300 times 0.5 gives us 45, well technically it gives us 4500, but then because you're multiplying decimals you can't forget to swoop 2 spaces out and to swoop 2 spaces back in for your final answer. So that's what you can see there in the purple. So you get 45.00, which is actually just 45 students. Notice again that my answer says students on it, and then I put a box around it. So example A, you want to go ahead and do on your own. So you can push pause now on the video and then come back. So what you're looking at now for, it says find the number of students at York Middle School that have chips as a snack. So I'm going to circle the chips, and that's 18%. So now I have 18% equals 18 per 100. So now that I know that it's 18 per 100, I'm going to go ahead and do 18 per 100 times 300. And again, the 300 came from those 300 students in the school. Our next step is going to be to cross simplify by dividing out the 100. So you get a 1 on the bottom and a 3 on the top. And then 18 times 3 is 54. So my final answer, which I've circled, is 54 students. So now at the top you can see that I'm going on the second method. So with 0.18 we've changed that from percent to decimal by moving it 2 spaces to the left. So now we have 0.18, and we're going to take the 300 that's in our school and we're going to multiply it by the 0.18. So you can see that multiplication here. You come up with 5400 as your answer, but you can't forget to swoop the 2 spaces out for the 0.18 and then swoop the 2 spaces back in to put that decimal there right after the 4. So that's how your final answer is, again, 54 students. All right, so now you're looking at the next page, and you're looking at percents greater than 100 and less than 1%. So these percents are a little weird and they don't look normal to you, so you want to make sure that you know the process because you're not used to seeing percents greater than 100 very often or less than 1. So the first example says 145% of 320. So the first thing you need to do is do 145 per 100, which I've done here for you, because 145% literally means 145 per 100. Then you're going to want to simplify that, and you get 29/29. So simplify it by dividing that out, and you get 29/20. From here, you're going to take your 29/20, and you're going to multiply it by the whole number, which was 320. Now the 320 is also divisible by the 20 on the bottom, so you're going to cross simplify that, and you get 1 on the bottom, and now you get 16 on the top. And your final step is going to be to multiply 29 times 16. And when you do the 29 times 16, you come up with 464. So 145% of 320 is 464. All right, so example number 3 says to find 220% of 65. So 220 per 100, that's our first step because it's percent. And then we're going to simplify. So I first divided by 20 and I get 11/5. Once you get your 11/5, you're going to multiply it by, whoops, hold on. Kind of got away from me. All right, so once you get your 11/5, you're going to multiply that by the 65, which was your whole number up top. Then you're going to cross simplify the 5 and the 65 because you're dividing out 5 by each one. So on that one you get 1 and 13 at the top, and then 13 times 11 is 143. So the answer, 220% of 65 is 143. Number 4 says to find 0.25% of 58. So the first thing that you want to do is change that percent. It says easier to use PDL, which is percent to decimal left method. So for these, for the numbers less than 1%, like the 0.25%, it's easier for you to use the percent to decimal left method. So we're going to do that now. We take 0.25% and we're going to change that percent into a decimal. Now remember, PDL, so we're going to go 2 spaces to the left. Now we get 0.0025. When we get that 0.0025, the next thing we need to do is rewrite it again, multiply it by the 58 that was our whole number. All right, we get 1450, and then we need to go out 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, and we need to come back in 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces on the bottom. So that makes our final answer 0.145. Notice I did not put that 0 there at the end because that 0 gets dropped. And also notice I had a leading 0 on the front. So B says 128% of 550. Now you want to go ahead and pause the video for a moment and you want to try and work that problem out on your own. All right, so you should have written 128 per 100, and then you're going to want to simplify that. You're going to do that. I divided out by 2 first, and then I believe I divided by 2 again. And I came up with 32 over 25. So once you have that fraction, you're going to then multiply that 32 over 25 by 550. Once you have the 32 over 25 and you're multiplying it by 550, you can go ahead and divide out that 25 by cross simplifying. So you can see I've already started that process down at the bottom, and it says, so we're going to divide 25 out of the top and the bottom, and we get 1 on the bottom and we get 22 on the top. And now we're just going to be multiplying 32 times 22, so we're going to multiply straight across the top. All right, so for this one, we get 704 as our answer, and you can see that I wrote the answer 704 up at the top, and I put a box around it. All right, C, you want to pause the video so that you can try this one on your own, and then come right back to me. All right, so for 0.3% of 200, you're going to use the percent to decimal left method again. So that means we're going to move that decimal 2 spaces to the left. Also, I made a little note, PDL. Remember, we have that empty egg carton right there, so to the left of that blue 0, so we need to put another 0 in there. We also need our leading 0. So when we make that change, our final percent to decimal left number is going to be 0.003. And then you're going to multiply that by the whole number of 200 that you have. So when you multiply that by the 200, you're going to then move the decimal out 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3, and then you move it back in 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3. So your final answer is going to be 0.6, and you want to put a box around that answer. And D, you want to go ahead and pause now so that you can work D out. So D, you're going to do 0.85%, and you're going to use PDL to get that 0.85% into a decimal. And remember, just because it's got a decimal in it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be changed. It does, because it's a percent. So now, in order to make it a true decimal, you're going to have to move it 2 spaces to the left. So when we do that, we have the egg carton there, we add the 0, and we also have the leading 0. So now you can see I've gotten started here. I'm going to have that whole number of 600, and I'm going to multiply that 600 times 0.0085. And so when I do that, we get 51000, but you can't forget, because you're multiplying by a decimal, you have to move that decimal out those 4 spaces and then move it back in 4 spaces. So you get an answer of 5.1. All right, example 5 says, in a recent Special Olympic game, Franklin County sent a team of 70 players. 20% of the team competed in soccer. How many athletes competed in soccer? So I have underlined 70 players, I've underlined 20%, and I've underlined soccer, because you want to remember that they could also ask you how many players didn't compete in soccer. Pardon me. So you have the 20%, so you're going to write the 20% as a decimal, and you get 0.20 or just 0.2. So because this is a word problem, the first thing that you actually need to do is write the 20% of 70. So that's the very first piece of your answer. If this was a test, you would have 2 lines. One line would be the answer, one line would be the problem, and the next line would be the answer. So again, our method that we're going to use is percent to decimal left. So we're going to take that 20% and move it 2 spaces to the left. So now we have 0.20 or 0.2. So now we're going to take the 70 and multiply it by our 0.2. We get 140, but we need to take that decimal out. 1 space, back in 1 space. So our final answer is 14 members. And what it's really saying is 14 members played soccer. All right, so this concludes our lesson on 2.7. Finding the percent of a number. What I need for you to do now is to complete the guided practice. which is going to be on textbook page 150. I need you to do numbers 1 through 4. And good luck!